It is just a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Chris Pallotto all the way from Oak Lawn, Illinois. Is that a suburb of Chicago?
It is, about 30 miles southeast.
I'm so darn excited to get you on because you're the only dentist I know who basically started at the beginning of this implant revolution. Let me read your bio.
Yeah.
Chris Pallotto was born, raised, and educated in Chicago. After graduating with a DDS from the University of Illinois College of Dentistry in 1986, he went to private practice for a short period. In 1988, he joined Nobel Pharma, which is now Nobel Biocare, as their first American hired dentist. Dr. Pallotto managed Nobel Biocare's business in Southern California until 1997, moving back to Chicago in that year. He then was sales director of Biora, a periodontal regeneration company. Biora was acquired by Straumann in 2003. They're out of Switzerland.
Yeah, Basel, Switzerland. Yep.
And Straumann appointed Dr. Pallotto its senior vice president of sales that same year. Dr. Pallotto left the dental industry in 2006 when he returned to private practice near Chicago. Dr. Pallotto is married to his wife, Teri, and has twin sons, Nicholas and Andrew. How old are Nicholas and Andrew?
They are 13.
13, my gosh. My baby's 21.
Started late.
So basically, so how long you've been a dentist? 30 years. This is 2016.
It is 30 years. Yeah, I checked the calendar. Yeah, I was amazed.
And the bad news I have for you is that pretty much everyone listening to this show is 30 and under. Every email I get, they're either 20% dental students or 80%, they just graduated, they're under 30, they're working for an associate, they're working for corporate, and they're trying to find their way. They love the show because they all tell me the same thing. They have an hour commute to work, and these shows are an hour, so walk them through the history of dental implants. But I'm gonna say a couple things that are their most reoccurring questions.
Yeah, okay.
Which implant to use? There's high cost, middle cost, low cost. Where do you learn how to place implants? It seems like in dentistry, for one guy that says that you should draw blood and splint it for platelet factors, another guy says that's voodoo. Bone grafting, how many different types of bone grafting are there? You could buy pretty much everything but gorilla bone in Phoenix. So just walk them through the history, because these kids weren't even born when you started.
I know.
So start with the very beginning. Start with PR per brand mark. And he came to America and pissed off everyone because he said only oral surgeons. He'd only talk to oral surgeons, and he said only oral surgeons can buy their product. Walk him through the journey. And what do they need to know about implants?
And only prosthodontists could restore. He was very strict at the beginning, but I think that had to do with his background as an orthopedic surgeon. He wasn't familiar with the landscape in the United States. So I graduated in '86, and that summer, the local Academy of Oral Surgery in Chicago hosted Brandemark for an all-day, 8-hour lecture. And I was transfixed. I mean, he was that guy, and I will tell you, there's members of your audience, these young folks, they all remember being in that lecture, just held in the hand of the presenter who just knew everything and spoke just to their soul. And that is what happened to me. So I right away was so interested in dental implants. And it just so happened that at that time, Nobel Pharma, they only hired as technical support dentists. There weren't regular salespeople at this point. So my representative in Chicago was a dentist who was about my age, and we got to know one another very, very well. We dined out on his expense account, Howard, and that was a lot of fun. And then one day he said, "Look, I'm going back to Sweden," and I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, he was going to go back into private practice." I said, "Who's going to do your job?" And he said, "Well, why don't you do it?" So I said, "Okay, fine." And I called them. They called me for an interview. And Howard, I didn't even own a suit. I had to go out and buy a suit. And this thing that I bought, it actually made sound while you walked. It was such a cheap suit. And I conducted the interview. And I remember that I was at the harbor in Rhode Island, at Newport, Rhode Island. Some guy was interviewing me, and helicopters were taking off of yachts. I had no idea what I was getting into. So they hired me. I held on to my practice for a while, but it became more and more of a responsibility for Nobel Pharma. And I was that guy in those days. If your gold screws were coming loose or you had some other problems, I was the tech support. And I was proud to say the first American dentist that they had hired. And of course, they've hired many since then, but I was the first one. So there was a lot of interesting responsibilities that went with this job. And the following November, I was asked to fly to Spokane, Washington, where an oral surgeon who lives there by the name of Kenji Higuchi was hosting an advanced surgical program for oral surgeons. And my job basically was to drive Branimark around. So you can imagine I'm 26 years old, and I'm in charge of driving Branimark around Spokane, Washington. And I will tell you, every night I would trace the route. I knew this was before GPS, and I would drive this route. I knew where I was going because Branimark was not patient with people who did not know where they were going, if you could believe it or not. And all the Swedish dentists were saying, know where you're going or else you're going to get in trouble. And he was very precise, pick me up tomorrow morning at 7:13.
How old were you when, you were 26. How old was Brandmark?
I think at this point he was in his late 60s or mid 60s.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And he was always, giving you some good advice, but very cagey. And the minute he was starting to talk about something confidential, he would immediately start to speak in Swedish. So, driving him around was, I think, sort of a window to the world of, how amazing dentistry can be. At this point, I just kind of thought dentists were around doing fillings, doing dentures, this kind of things. But Branimark and people he worked with, and in those days it was Philip Worthington from the University of Seattle, University of Washington in Seattle, Steve Perrell, Dan Sullivan, names that your audience probably don't know, but were sort of pioneers in sort of getting the osseointegration technique established, in this country. And that was it. I was bitten, and I was bitten to work in the dental implant industry because it was very exciting. And you need to know something, Howard. Today all these companies are publicly traded, and they, launch their strategies based on their quarterly reports. Back then, Nobel Pharma was a small subsidiary of a big company called Nobel Industries, which was making billions of dollars in the industry of arms and ordnance. So they didn't really care whether the company did well or even made a profit. In fact, I remember being in the office one day when someone came by and said, and this was like 7 years after I had been with the company, that, hey, we made a profit finally. So, that was sort of the arc of the dental implant industry.
And now, just for the kids, just to interrupt, Nobel Pharmacare, Nobel comes from Nobel Peace Prize, because Nobel, you said the company made arms and coordinates. He was the inventor of dynamite, and then he felt so bad about the dynamite wasn't used for construction and mining. It was used in military and killed so many people that they came out with the Nobel Peace Prize. So the name Brandmark, there was an implant Brandmark, but the company Nobel Biocare, that's why it's easy to remember that it's Swedish.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Nobel Industries, if you believe their folklore, was the actual company started by Alfred Nobel. And I went to a city in the north of Sweden called Karlskoga, where back in those days they were manufacturing the dental implants on the CNC machines. And I got a tour of the warehouse. And I am not lying. because in one section of this warehouse was all the dental implant stuff, and then in another section of the warehouse was actual arms. You could kind of see them. And I said, "What's that?" "Oh, that's just a training bazooka or something along those lines." So that's sort of how the start was. And you'd have little ladies in the factory kind of just deburring the implants after they came off the CNC machines. I think, to me, a lot of people think of these things as being so sophisticated. But back in those days, there was quite a bit of a human touch involved, with it.
Go back for the kids. How does an orthopedic surgeon named Brandmark, how does he get into dental implants? What was his insight discovery to go from orthopedic surgery to dentistry?
Well, it was serendipity. He just was studying bone. He was an orthopedic surgeon studying bone. And he just wanted to study blood flow in the bone of rabbits. So he had some very expensive optics linked up to a titanium apparatus that was threaded through the bone of rabbits. And when the experiment was over, Howard couldn't take the titanium piece out. And that's when he kind of understood that he was onto something. In fact, he was going to move on, but there was other people who said, no, this may have an application in dentistry. So it was serendipitous. And, it's an interesting thing about what you say about the Nobel Prize. There were a lot of people in Sweden who felt that because of this discovery, Brandmark should have won a Nobel Prize for science or for medicine. But because he was Swedish, and because the company that was manufacturing the implants was named after Alfred Nobel, he was never considered for the prize in medicine or in scientific research. So it was interesting about how the politics played out in that particular instance for him. So
well, you should have told him that Obama got a Nobel Prize after being in office for 8 hours.
For 8 hours, he woke up that morning and got it, right?
What did he do?
I know.
How did he get that award? He's from your neck of the wood. Obama's from Chicago.
Yeah, no, I don't know him. He doesn't. He's not my patient.
You haven't done any implants on him?
No, not that I know of. Not that I know of. I know his. I know Michelle's dentist, but Howard, no one's saying anything.
Yeah. So
no one's speaking.
So
go
ahead.
Well, it was true, that this company restricted its sales to oral surgeons and to prosthodontists, and they had a couple people talking about the restorative aspect. But what began to take place over time is, and this I think proved to be to the detriment of Nobel, is that other practitioners, periodontists in particular, said, well, I'm just going to go elsewhere. I want to place implants, but I'm not going to, if they're not going to teach me, I'm not going to use their products, but I'm going to find someone. And so, to my way of thinking, this led to, at the time, a lot of people migrating over to use the IMZ implant, if you remember that name, or the Corvent implant. IMZ was a German plant, was out in California in Van Nuys.
IMG was out of Germany, and Corvent, wasn't that Jerry Niznik in Southern California?
That was Jerry Niznik's company. Yep, that was Jerry Niznik's company.
And then he sold that to Dentsply.
He sold it more than once. I think he sold it, and he took it back, and then he sold it again. I think he sold it to, boy, don't quote me on this, but I do know he sold it to Dentsply, and that didn't work out, and he took it back, and I think he made it into Implant Direct, which now has been purchased by Danaher.
Right.
Which is, yeah.
And Danaher, and rumor has it that his 5-year non-compete clause is up, and that he's going to be back real shortly with something new.
I've heard that as well. And I think he, like him or don't like him, I think he brings something to the profession and moves the ball forward.
He reminds me a lot of Steve Jobs in genius, personality, I mean, the guy knows exactly what he wants, and he's not going to hear anything but, he's a bulldozer, like Jobs,
No, and to be honest with you, I think Nobel in those days, by being so restrictive, and I really like Nobel. I've got a lot of friends there still, but I think by being so restrictive, uh, they pushed people to other companies. Now, mind you, they will tell you that the reason it was good that they did that was that they established the efficacy of the treatment, which I don't know if that is true because, today I think everyone shrugs off the whole idea of osseointegration, that it occurs with all, across all
But
implants.
take these kids back to their first birthday. What was the reputation of the early adopters in 1988 and 89 that were placing subperiosteals, ramus frames, root forms? Were these guys applauded as pioneers, or were they thought of as nut job quacks?
Yeah, both. By the time I showed up and osseointegration was established, the guys doing subperiosteals and staples were considered to be nut job cranks. But the fact of the matter is that after World War II, they were pioneers. They really did take care of some people. In fact, I had a patient in my own practice, Howard, who had a mandibular sub, and the thing was failing, and he had a chronic infection. But I can tell you, he would just take antibiotics till all day long before he would let you take that sub out of his mouth. So these people were functional with these devices. And I don't think that you can, discount that. And I think in recent history, it's kind of a pity, that they're not, recognized, for their work. Because I think they did help a lot of people.
I just like to bring up that story because, right now the people who are considered quacks and nut jobs are the, what do you call it? The anti-amalgam, the anti-vaccine, the total oral health continuum, where they say, there's periodontal bugs and Alzheimer's and livers and cancers and colons and all this stuff. And no one knows if they're right or wrong. But I'm just saying that a decade or two or three later, like for instance, people have no idea why the autism rate is skyrocketing, but they're the first to tell you that it's not caused from all these things. It's like, well, if you don't know what's causing it, how do you know what's not causing it? I mean, you're so fast to tell me what's not causing it, but you can't have a population that's doubling the rate of autistic children every 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bad plot.
Well, it's interesting you say it. One of my own children has Asperger's syndrome, and, it kind of touches, close to home. And
sorry, I did not know that. I hope that example wasn't offensive.
No. And what I'll tell you, though, is that probably 30 years ago, Howard, he would not have been diagnosed. He may have just been that weird kid in the class who got no help and who was, socially maladjusted, for the whole time he was growing up. So I don't know the cause of this. I tend to think that back to our original point, that even if, say, the early implantologists were considered crackpots or kind of experimental dentists, the fact remained what they did establish was that people did better when they had some kind of additional support placed in their jaw to replace teeth. And had it not been for those folks and that idea even existed, well, then anyone would have even suggested to Brannemark that, hey, your little screw here could serve as a root substitute to support teeth. And I think that's the way. And for those young people today, I will tell you, you know this as well, when the CEREC was new, I said, who in hell is going to pay good money for this cockamamie idea? Nobody. It was like ridiculous. No one even thought of it.
I did. I did 1990 CEREC 1. It barely made it temporary.
I did too. I did too a lot later. But the fact is that, these ideas have a way of growing on us. You know what I mean? And there are certain folks who just don't let go, and they keep developing. And even if you're not doing CEREC now, you're going to image. You're going to start imaging your preps. You're going to start imaging your Invisaligns, and this is the brave new world. I wish I could practice a lot more years just to see what these young kids have coming, because they're going to be living.
My baby's 21 and I'm 54. So if you're 58, your baby's 13. You're going to be working 20 more years, buddy.
Oh, listen, how many more of these? We got to do an annual podcast, and so we can see how much I age.
Well, it's funny because, everything that comes out gets better, faster, cheaper, smaller. And implants started out with subperiosteals and ramus frames and ended up as little root form implants. I remember my first intraoral camera from Patterson was $40,000. What was that big refrigerator thing called?
Yep.
Do you remember what it was called?
I don't remember what it was called. But
an intraoral camera, is a couple of grand. And my first DVR was $800 and it sucked. And now they're $35 at Walmart and they're perfect and half the size.
And you watch videos on your phone.
Yeah. So let's get right to the meat, because these kids, okay, so you're talking to 20% dental students, the rest under 30. Where do I go to learn? Okay, so everybody that's graduated from dental school for the last 100 years says, they didn't teach me nothing. I did, they're coming out of school now saying, I didn't do a single Invisalign. I didn't place one implant. I only did 5 canals of endo. I did 45 fillings. I extracted 9 teeth. So she's very specific. She wants to start placing an implant, but she needs to find out where to go to training. She thinks, before I need to go to training, I need to go to the system, because the people that teach all the training are usually lined in with a system. Her first question is, I got $350,000 of student loans. Do I need to buy your Cadillac, Nobel Biocare, or your Lexus, Straumann, or can I go middle of the road? These value brands like Megagen. Can I go cheap? I mean, there's implants coming out of Russia and Israel for under $100. So is that enough questions to start? Walk her through. She's on the first floor. She's never placed an implant. She wants to go to the second floor and replace a missing molar with an implant. How does she go from 0 to 1? Because that's 1,000 times harder than going from 1 to 2.
You've interviewed Tony Robbins, or Howard, I know you interviewed Tony Robbins, and I like Tony Robbins as well. And one of the things he likes to say is to pattern yourself after someone. In other words, find somebody who is going to be a mentor to you, or somebody you can copy, someone who's been successful that you can copy. So I think that would be the first thing to do, is to seek somebody out that way. And then in terms of other education, one of the amazing things I have noticed out there right now is the amount of video education there is. It's on Dental Town. Jay Resnick has his own oral surgery website. AGD has programs on their website. And of course, it's a little more expensive, but the Spear education is also very good. I don't know that they have any implant placement modules. So that's what I would do. And then follow the directions as closely as you can. When you're first placing implants, it's not a time to improvise, and you want to be very careful. Now, in terms of systems, many of these companies now, once you get to know the sales representative, will lend you the surgical stuff, and as long as you make a purchase of the implants. So you don't really have to make a huge investment from the very, very beginning. And then at this point, and this is going to be a long answer here, when I was at Nobel, and if my Nobel friends hear this, I know I'm going to get, a hard time about it. But
don't worry,
a lot of the cost of the dental implant.
No one listens to this show.
A lot of the cost
just between me and you.
Okay, listen, I know what it costs to make an implant, Howard. Okay, and I know what some of the salaries and incentives are for these people in dental implant companies. And the fact remains is that so much of the cost of your implant goes to supporting that stuff and not the actual research or manufacture of the dental implant. I would say they all work reasonably well enough, and so find something that fits your price point. Okay, I think OCO is good value for that. Implant Direct has good value. OCO Biomedical. OCO Biomedical. Implant Direct. And even Straumann has purchased another company so that they can offer a lower priced implant called Neodent.
That's the number one seller out of Brazil.
Yeah, right. So that would be my advice, would be to say, find a mentor. You can find a program. There's a lot of continuing education out there online. By the way, out your way, UCLA has a very good year-long implant program under Peter Moy, who's the oral surgeon there. That's also a good one, but it's not inexpensive. It's costly. But that's another source that you can do. And then pick a company, they're more interested in selling you the implants. So buy the implants, borrow the case to do. Guess what? Try out a few and see which kind of suits you better, your style, or which, I know I have my preferences in an implant system. And if you're young, you don't know what your preferences are, try a few out.
Well, what are your preferences? What do you use? Because I know what they're asking. I get their emails. They always say, well, ask him what he uses. And they want brands, names, details. What does the man Chris Pallotto use?
Well, everything comes through this office, it seems, one way or another. Okay, but my preference is for a system that is placed at the bone level. I don't like implants that are above the bone. They're too hard to develop good contours and emergence profile. I like the bone level implants, and amongst those, I like OCO, excuse me, I like BioHorizons, and I like the Nobel Biocare Noble Active. Those implants have good success rates, and they restore beautifully. But I will also tell you, Howard, they're not the only ones. Those are just, what we do in our office. In our office, we place and restore Zimmer and Straumann.
Wasn't Carl Misch the one who wrote everybody's textbook in school? Wasn't he one of the founders of BioHorizon in the beginning?
Yeah, he was. He was the founder of that company, and he's just a great opinion leader. By the way, I mean, he's written the book. The book on dental implants is written by Carl Misch, and that's another good, for the younger dentists out there. He started the company, and I believe now it's run by some venture capitalists. I think he may still be a partner. I'm not sure, or at least a shareholder in BioHorizons right now. But those are the three.
Rumor has it that he sold that off over the years, but that now he's is he involved with Jack Hahn system now with Glidewell, which is the low cost provider. They were doing Jack Hahn's tapered implants, but didn't Carl Misch join their team, or have you heard that?
I'm not sure. I'm not so tied in to see what's happening with that system over there. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, everybody wants to partner with Carl Misch. He still has a great following and is, so
I want
a credible source.
I want to summarize a couple of the most genius thing I've heard in a long time is that don't pick an implant system, pick a mentor. I think that mentor should be someone in your own town, so that you have a buddy.
Yeah.
That you can have someone to go eat a cheeseburger with and watch a football game with. Someone who can get you out of trouble if you get into trouble. And so pick a mentor first, and if that mentor uses ABC implants, well, then just copy that guy to a T. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I have done, and I've not done that. I've done that not only for implants, but for endo as well. I befriended a terrific endodontist nearby me, And I've gone from doing 0 root canals to a lot of root canals, in a very short time. But that's where I think you should start, is to find a friendly person who's generous enough to share. And you know what? You model yourself after that person. I mean, assuming, that you have a good idea that they know, what they're doing. And you know what? Then things will go on their own. Things will connect the dots on their own. So, one of the things I do want to say about companies as well, and this is an observation, Howard, and I don't know if you've seen anything similar, and this is why I say company loyalty is something that has to be carefully weighed, okay? I don't know if I'm really speaking out of school, but in the arc of the time I was in the dental industry, the people that I worked with, they were in the dental industry. That's where they started their careers. And they worked in dental laboratories and found their way into industry, and then they found their way into the dental implant industry. Well, what began to happen, Howard, as these companies started to grow and started to be very, very successful, is that it coincided with a period of time in the medical device industry where their profits were starting to tighten. And what it led to was a lot of people from companies like Boston Scientific or Smith & Nephew, medical device companies, people leaving those companies, coming over to dentistry, seeking opportunities, that it was, fertile ground. And one of the things that I saw was, without their background in dentistry, these folks really didn't know how to work with dentists. They're used to working with big hospitals. And then here you have a dentist in his small office. And they had a hard time adapting to that. They would make assumptions that the reimbursement pattern was similar to medicine, which, is, you and I know, it really is not. And as a result, I think that the relationship between the companies and the dentists have suffered. And I say this because, having worked in the dental industry and having a very strong profit motive, which you have to have when you work over there, I really kind of feel that instead of really wanting to connect with dentists and people wanting to do better or wanting to help the dentist, something has been lost, as we have these different types of individuals now working and managing in these companies. The good news is many of them don't succeed. Many of them cannot make the transition from a big old medical company to a dental company. It's just very hard for them to, keep that connection. They're not used to talking face to face with a dentist and making an agreement over a purchase. They want to go to the purchasing department and make, millions and millions of dollars a deal. So what I would tell those young people out there is be careful with your loyalties to these companies. Choose wisely. Okay. I know I got off on a tangent there, but I think that's worth understanding for people.
I love your tangents. So she should find a mentor in her town and pick the mentor before the implant system. And if your mentor says, use these blue implants from Georgia, use those. If he says, use the red ones from Israel, use those. Find the mentor. That's the most important thing.
Right. And then build from there. The mentors will help you locate the continuing education you need, and will help you ask the right questions.
So when I want you to go back. You said something I'm afraid it might have flown over someone's head, that you like to place the implants at the bone level. Does that mean that you like to place them and suture them up and put the tissue over it and then go back and recover them lightly, as opposed to a two-stage implant surgery as opposed to immediate loading?
All right, yeah, that's a good point. Let me take a step back. By a bone level implant, what I mean is that the face of the implant is when it's placed is even with the bone, with the adjacent bone. For example, the Straumann implant, the classic Straumann implant, has that, what I used to call the bugle, that would be stick out over the bone. What I refer to bone level implant is the implant that is adjacent to it. And then what our method is to do is we will put a healing abutment on there, and we'll let it heal for 12 weeks and then do the restorative. But there's a lot of variations on that. If we're working with single rooted teeth, we will often put a temporary on the tooth, and immediate load. We're a little shy about immediate loading molars at this point in our office, but that doesn't mean we won't do it, along the way as we learn more about it. So so what we do oftentimes, and it's a belt and suspenders approach, is if we're unsure about the bone quality, we will have a flipper ready to go and we'll have a temporary ready to go all at the same time. It's a lot of work, but it saves headaches.
Well, and I also think the lesson for these young kids is that when you're old dogs like us, we're the doctor dog and the patient's the tail. But when you're under 30 and you're in your 20s, patients talk you into all this stuff, and they're going to have to talk you into sticking your tongue in a light socket. And, the patient says, I want same day crown. Well, maybe you're a candidate for same day crown, but maybe it's going to be a hell of a lot better if I take an ImperGov impression and send it to a lab man who's made 50,000 crowns. And maybe this tooth needs to, maybe you need to wear a flipper for 3 months and let this thing osseointegrate. And I think a large part of this, talking kids into not being the doctor and being the tail, is because they think they have to be all things to all people. And, you have to be able to walk from at least 1 out of 20 patients who's telling you to do something. Like I had it last week. I mean, they refuse x-rays. Well, great. I'm not Wonder Woman. I may look like Wonder Woman in a bra and a tutu, but I can't see through your bone. I'm a talking monkey. I need an x-ray. If you're in here telling me that there's not going to be any x-rays, we have 3 doors to exit this building: the front, the back, the side. Go find someone else. I'm not doing it. There's 1 million attorneys. I don't need this.
Yeah, it's interesting. We all want to be infallible, as dentists. And we ran into a case not so very long ago. It was an all-on-4 case. And this patient, we got the teeth out, and we started putting the implants in, and the bone was so soft. And we had promised the patient that day that we were going to attach, that teeth in a day. And we worked all damn day on it. And we succeeded. And we were lucky enough that the implants integrated. But I will tell you, you still have to have the courage to be a doctor and to do your best to fulfill your promises. But sometimes, Mother Nature and biology are not going to agree with you. And you need to make sure that the patient knows that there can be contingencies. And since that day, when we do an all-on-4, we say, you know what, you may end up leaving here with a denture today. You may not get your teeth. But because to us, the goal is osseointegration. I know your goal is to get teeth, but our job is to make sure we get good implants in the bone. So it takes a little while because everybody has pride, and you want to be able to be a superhero and deliver for your patients. But it's not always possible. You have to make sure your patients know that. And believe me, I'm still making mistakes like that.
And a lot of people think all-on-4 just means that there's 4 implants and you do a roundhouse bridge, a 12-unit bridge on all-on-4. But all-on-4 is a different concept because you're going past alveolar bone and you're going into mandibular. Talk about the difference between all-on-4. Those are longer implants. Those are angled.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of all on four is that you place two angled implants that are angled distally in the canine strut area, and the idea enables you to have longer cantilevers. The original Brandemark concept was 6 implants in the upper and 5 in the lower. This is just another way of redistributing forces. The concept with all on four is that it is not typically carried out on an edentulous person. That person is edentulated. Well, you're left with all this alveolus, and in many cases that has to be taken down, in some cases as much as a centimeter, in order to allow room for the abutments and the restorative material. And it is a terrific solution for a lot of people, but we also have to be careful in how we apply it. Because yes, if you've got a person who really has a broken down dentition, it could be the perfect thing. But I am not comfortable with taking off a centimeter of alveolus on a 50-year-old person, for example. I think it's too much, and we have to then think of other ways to solve the problems for these people. We are now segueing into another area, and I don't know what it's like for you guys in Arizona, but here in Chicago, we've got a few of the clinics. We've got another one called the Clear Choice clinics, and I think they do a lot of good work for a lot of good people. But once again, you have to be very careful that it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of remedy, for what is ailing people. So, and I guess one of the things that I think about is their marketing is so powerful that people, that no other dentist can perform this kind of procedure. Only they are able to do it. And so we have to make sure that our patients know, hey, we are capable of doing this kind of stuff as well.
I think when Clear Choice came into Phoenix, I thought they helped everyone because they did so much television advertising that it just totally raised the number of questions that your own patients who come in and trust you would say, what do you think about implants? And I'd say,
Right.
well, how do you even know the word implants? Did your friend, did your sister, your mom? And they talk about these Clear Choice commercials. And so, the industry
Yeah.
and
Yep.
the dental industry has very
Here
fragmented marketing.
in Chicago, they had Mike Ditka doing it.
For Clear Choice?
Here in Chicago, they had Mike Ditka doing them.
Now, we have Mike Ditka. So most people, if they're young, think that you are probably a Bears fan, but little do they know that my Arizona Cardinals were in St. Louis 1960 to 1987, but before 1960, they actually started out in Chicago 1920 to 1959. So my question to you, are you a true, authentic Arizona Cardinals fan dating back from 1920, or did you switch to the Bears?
I'm sad to say that since birth, I was made into a Bears fan, which is very difficult these days to try to carry on. Here in Chicago now.
Well, what year were you born? 1958.
1958.
It was still the Cardinals, buddy.
1958.
It was the Cardinals in your town when you were 1 and 2. The Bears didn't get there till 1960 when you were 3.
I didn't get. Yeah, I didn't get that. I tell you what's so funny is I could never get my mind around St. Louis Rams, and I also have a hard time getting my mind around Arizona Cardinals. You know what I mean? It's sort of a funny. We were talking about this the other day in my house about how different teams are named, and now it kind of seems more appropriate that the Rams are back in Los Angeles. I don't know what, but I think I'm pulling for the Cardinals this year. The Bears got nothing. The Bears got nothing. There's a joke going around here that the Bears fans are the Bears are the new Cubs.
And there's another.
Every year the loyal fans are.
I think there's so many things when I think of Chicago. Obviously, the American Dental Association is downtown on the lake at 211 East Chicago Avenue. But when you lecture in Poland, you'll never meet a dentist in Poland that doesn't have a sister, brother, cousin, nephew, niece, whatever, living in Chicago. And Chicago is the largest population of Polish people outside of Poland. And in Poland, they claim that the city of Chicago has 1 million Polish people. Do you buy that number?
Oh yeah, I completely buy that number. My dental assistant is Polish. I've got so many Polish patients. I mean, it is true, and in fact, I've even heard that the population in Chicago is beginning to rival that of Poland in terms of the total Polish
Oh my
population.
God, whenever you lecture
Yeah.
in Poland, you fly to Chicago, and there's a flight from Lot like every 2 hours nonstop to Warsaw. I mean, it's just like the Polish Express right out of Chicago.